Everyone, I'm Matt Whitman. Thanks again for joining us for another segment of Seattle Real Estate News. I am again joined by the wonderful Lynn Robertson, who is the president, founder, and broker of your Seattle home team. Lynn.
Hello, Matt.
How are you?
Very nice to see you again.
Good to
Always
see you too.
Good to see you.
So let's just jump into our next email here that we have. This is a great one because I've actually had a lot of friends ask me the same thing. So this is perfect. I'm glad that you guys are feeling safe to actually ask these questions. So this one says, Lynn, I've heard two terms, closing costs and escrow. Honestly, I don't know really what it entails. Can you explain in detail what these terms mean? Excellent question.
They really are, and they're probably the most commonly asked questions that I get as well.
Exactly.
I'll give you the short version, and then for longer versions you can actually go to our website. To be perfectly honest, I've had these questions asked so many times that it's part of our yourseattlehometeam.com website. You can look both in blogs and under buyer tabs and get more detailed versions of what I'm about to give you the short version of. Okay?
Great.
So starting with Escrow. Escrow is actually a company. It's a neutral third-party company that is hired to follow the actions that are dictated by both buyer and seller.
Oh, okay.
So this neutral party must have confirmation from each other party, buyer and seller, and if two separate sets of directions are given to escrow, they cannot move forward until there is some resolution.
So
to
everyone
those
has to be
differences.
on the same page.
Has to be in
basically.
complete agreement. Escrow is also going to gather documents toward the end of the transaction, and so they will be receiving the loan documents from the lender, and again instructions from buyers, instructions from sellers, and most often those instructions come in via their agents as their representatives. Escrow will organize and compile all of the numbers and create what's called the settlement statement, and the buyer and seller will each come in and review the settlement statement with the escrow agent at the company and sign the documents once, again, everything has been settled.
Right. So it's not such a scary thing, because people have been like,
It's really not a scary thing. It's one of those terms that we use very loosely, and most often people don't really understand it until they go through the process. And very often, even while they're going through the process, it's not really clear that this is escrow.
Right.
And what they do looks like magic, because they do it seamlessly behind the scenes.
Right. It's like, I'm going through escrow. I don't know what it is.
I don't know what it is, but here I am. Oh my God. Fasten your seatbelt. Yeah, exactly.
That is so great.
That's
and what about
right.
the other part of the question with closing costs?
And that has everything to do with settlement statement,
Right.
which I just referred to. The closing costs are different for the buyer and for the seller.
Oh, okay.
There are some overlapping items. For instance, there will be prorated property tax and prorated insurance for each buyer and seller on the property. Depending on when they close during the month, that escrow agent is going to prorate their portion to the day of recordation.
Okay.
The day that the recorder actually stamps the deed with the new buyer's information.
Gotcha.
Or recording number. So there's some overlap in that. The buyer additionally is going to have loan fees, and that will directly be negotiated with them and their lender. Depending on the type of loan that they take, VA loans have specific funding, FHA loans have a specific loan fee, conventional loans can have a specific loan fee, and that could be dependent on the interest rate that the buyer chooses to take. They may have 2 or 3 different interest rates that they can take, and the loan fee is going to be different for each one.
Right.
The long and short of that is the lender may give you a lower interest rate, but they're going to charge you more money for that loan. So they're going to get their money up front or down the road, they're going to get it from you. So that's part of the buyer's fees. The seller is going to have a couple of extra fees that the buyer won't, and those specifically are commission. The seller pays the commissions to both listing and selling agent. And they're also going to have an excise tax, which in my humble opinion is a fancy term for sales tax. And right now in King County it's 1.78% of the sales price.
Oh, okay.
So I estimate, just for general terms, that the buyer's closing costs are approximately 3% of the sales price.
3%. Okay.
And the seller's closing costs will be approximately 8%, 8 to 8.5% of the sales price.
Okay.
And those fees are all due at signing and will actually be processed on the day of recordation. When I say processed, all checks that are brought in will be deposited on the day of recordation.
Right.
And again, just to clarify one more piece of this transaction, it's very commonly confused what is closing and what is recordation, or signing and recordation. Clients will all come in and sign documents about 5 days before the documents, meaning the deed, actually records. Okay. So they'll come in, they'll bring their funds, they'll sign all the documentation. Escrow does a few more things behind the scenes with those documents, and then they take them to the county recorder. The recorder actually does stamp those documents, and at that time, transfer of that property has occurred.
Wow. Okay, so one more time. So percentage-wise, it's 3% for the...
Approximately 3%, approximately 3% closing costs for the buyer.
Okay.
And approximately 8 to 8.5% for the seller.
Okay.
And those fees again include escrow fees, title fees, prorated insurance, prorated taxes, and then the miscellaneous fees for buyer and seller.
Great. So that'll give people kind of a variable to go by anyway, as far as...
Yeah, it's a real high overview. Again, go to the website and read more detailed information, or call or email at any time, and we can answer more specific questions.
Great, thank you so much. That clears it up for me. I know I had that question too. Again, this is Matt Whitman, and we're at the Seattle Real Estate News. Thank you for joining us. Again, if you have any questions at all, these are all great questions that everybody has but are scared to ask. Email us at questions@yourseattlehometeam.com. Thanks again, and we'll see you soon.